Welcome to Spotlight ETSU. I'm your host, Carrie Oliveira. Today's guest is Dr. Karin Bartoszuk, the Associate Dean of the School of Graduate Studies at ETSU. Welcome to Spotlight.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, Carrie. Thank you for having me.
We appreciate somebody from this is the first time we've had somebody from the graduate school come to talk to us. I always just refer to it as the graduate school, but it's the School of Graduate Studies technically. So we're going to spend some time talking about what's new and exciting and wonderful in the graduate programs at ETSU. We're going to talk some about Illuminated Magazine, but we're also going to talk about you a bit because you're a very busy person, and because you're faculty and an administrator and you do your own research, so you've got a lot of stuff going on. So we'll start by talking about how you came to be at ETSU. How long have you been here?
I have been here since 2005, and I came here because I got a phone call from one of my former colleagues that I went to doctoral school with.
You were in North Dakota, if I remember correctly.
Fargo, North Dakota.
So that's terrible.
Well, that is good side, but it was cold.
Yes.
Yeah, and I got that phone call in February.
Yes.
So Blake Snyder, who is no longer here, called me, and he's told me about a position that came open here and told me about ETSU and the department, and I decided to apply. And I was invited for an interview. I got the position, so I came here for the fall of 2005 semester.
And so when you were hired into the College of Education. The department names have changed.
Changed, yeah. During that time, it was the Department of Human Development and Learning.
Right. And the courses are all still tagged as Human Development and Learning, but now you are teaching and learning.
We are teaching and learning, and some of the courses actually are now in Human Services, and some are in teaching and learning.
Okay, so that curriculum sort of got split up. And so now you belong to teaching and learning. And so what is your area of sort of academic specialty?
I always was interested in identity development during adolescence. And with the changes that have happened in the last couple of decades, this transition to adulthood is getting kind of longer.
Very long.
We even have a new term, emerging adulthood.
Okay.
So I am interested in identity development now, entering this phase of emerging adulthood and looking at what does that mean. It takes longer to become an adult.
Right.
At least how we defined it in the past. The markers are not the same anymore.
Right. It used to be you turned 18 and you were an adult and you got out and got a job and took
you
care of yourself.
You got financially independent.
Yes.
You had a child. You started a family. You had a committed partner. So all of these things are happening for many people, especially college students at a later age. Also, what does that do to family relationships?
Yes.
So there is a change there, and we are just starting to understand that.
And we also see a lot of people coming back home, right? So people leave the house, they go to college, they have trouble finding a job, and then they come back home where they can live.
Yep, or they find a job, but it is very low paying. So they
Can't live on it.
Can live on it, yeah. So what does that mean? Also, you know, from the parents' perspective, we now have parents who postpone their retirement so their children can go to school. So instead of what they plan to do to retire maybe in their early middle 60s, they are planning now to work longer to support their children to get to school.
Which they were really hoping was going to happen much earlier in life, and that definitely impacts your financial viability as you move into your later years when you're supposed to be like taking cruises and whatnot. No, but you're like helping your kid pay the rent. When you talk about identity development, are you talking about like the development of a sense of self or the development of a sense of like an independent person, or what specifically about identity are you looking at?
That's a great question. I am focusing on how Erickson started to look at identity development in terms of exploration and commitment in these different domains.
Okay.
And when Erickson first developed his theory in the 50s and 60s, he was talking about mostly about values, religion, occupation, politics. and how young people find a place in society that fits for them.
Right.
So these questions, who am I, where am I going, are really important.
Yes.
So after Erickson, some of his students took it further, and we have now different measures. We look at identity statuses, and all of that is in terms, do people explore and do people make a commitment, and how does that work?
Explore, and when we're talking about exploration and commitment, we're talking about exploring anything or like any facet of their existence on the planet and committing to anything.
Well, we now look mainly in 8 domains that we examine. So we still have politics, religion, values, occupation, family, friendships, gender roles.
Oh.
And then, of course, you have things like recreation. Ethnic identity development is a whole separate body of that with different measurements on that. So
I can totally imagine that would be, and I would imagine that that's sort of dependent on where you live too, how important your ethnic identity is to you. Oh my goodness. That's so cool. So is this the research you're working on currently? I know this is generally your program of research. I remember, has to be like 5 years ago now, maybe you were doing a giant survey about, asking college students on this campus about where they were in their sort of like emergent adulthood and whatever else. And so this is the theme of the program of your research. So what are you working on currently?
Right now, I got 2 pretty big projects. One of them is I got an RDC grant, a research and development grant.
That's an on-campus grant.
On-campus grant. A couple years ago, I collected my data from college students and parents. And one of the things that I was really interested in was, do the measures that we have even capture the relationship between college students and their parents? Because college students move out, well, some still live at home. So we have all these family measures that we are using, but they are often based on a relationship when they still live at home.
Right.
And we used them during adolescence. They worked very well. So the first thing was I had focus groups, and I had different family environment, family climate measures. And we went through these measures, and I got the parents as well as the students report what applies to them today. What are the questions that really have meaning to them?
So you do like a skill development, basically.
Well, I'm kind of looking more revalidation. If we can kind of use these scales and what scale they would prefer.
That's so cool. And what did you, do you have preliminary findings? Are you done with that one?
Oh yeah. We found, there was one scale that students as well as parents liked more than the other scales. And that was the scale who had more concrete examples of what people were doing together.
So how families spend time together?
How families spend time together. We go to the movies together. We go to church together. It was more these very concrete examples that they were saying. But also, usually when we are together, we get along.
Right.
We do not fight a lot, or, very concrete examples were there. So we selected that scale. We also asked students and parents, in terms of what was important to them. What are the issues on their mind? What do they worry about? And again, it was education, finances, their future.
And everybody's finances, I would imagine. Like as parents, I worry about not only my kids, I want them to be well, but I also worry I'm looking down my own road. Ooh, that's a lot to be worried about. Because at some point you hope to come to a point in your life where you don't have to worry about money. And then we're worrying about that forever.
Yeah, and it's supporting.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the parents supporting the children. So,
oh my goodness.
But the parents also were stating that they worry about their college students' child when they go to college about their health. Are they eating right? Are they?
They're not.
Their safety. Safety was a big issue that the parents were bringing up. Are they safe? Are they making the right decisions?
Yes.
Whereas the students
were not
worried about these 2 issues. Didn't come up. The other aspect that I thought was interesting, and this is, when it came to technology, we kind of found that about 60% of our students have their parents as friends on their Facebook. And we ask about that.
That's higher than I expected.
And we ask about that, and the response we received most often was that the students were saying, well, I like that my parents are using technology, I'm proud of them, that they stay in touch, and all these things. So it was very, very interesting.
That's so interesting to me. So, I mean, if you would have it believe, right, I mean, I think based on sort of like presentations of American families in the media, not only fictitious families, but the way that, you know, politicians and whatnot talk about the family unit, there's this like pervasive idea, the disintegration of the American family, because it doesn't look quite as nuclear as it used to. But apparently that doesn't mean anything about the family coming apart. We're just adapting.
Yeah, I also think the ways we communicate with, I mean, cell phone usage, messaging, I mean, the majority of students stated that they were in daily contact with either their mother or their fathers through text, through cell phones.
So families are close.
The ones that we surveyed, yes. Now, having said that, we have about 250 students and we had about 160 parents.
Okay.
Now, I think, as you know, with all survey research, there is probably a limitation. We cannot generalize here.
Right.
The students and parents who participated were probably very close,
yes,
because
they self-selected in.
they self-selected in. But it still gives us a glimpse, you know, what are in terms of the measures. It's also very interesting that we kind of found the same pattern in terms of how parents and students describe the family environment.
Everybody agrees on basically on what the family looks like and does and how it functions.
But the parents still stated that their perception of the relationship was a little bit more positive than the students. So,
which I would imagine is
yeah.
typical. And that doesn't mean anything bad. We're just coming at it from different vantage points. That's groovy. Okay, so that was one project that you're in progress. You're still working on the data for that one?
We are still working on the data for it. I'm started to present now. I need to find time to write it up.
Yeah,
that's my...
Dealing with the numbers is the easy part. The rest of it, that's the challenge. What else you got going on?
I am working on a project kind of looking at this successful transition to adulthood for college students and including aspects of retention, how to get successful to college. What are the things that what are the risks, what are the protective factors? And I also did a pilot of this study, and what we found was, I mean, there's a lot of research out there. There are a lot of aspects identified already, but there's not much out there that we know in terms of psychological variables. Things like identity development, different types of motivation, stress. We kind of know there are these different stressors out there.
Yes.
And we identified a model right now. I had about 4 protective factors and 12 risk factors
that are predicting
that seem to be working, but they were highly correlated with each other. So right now, what we have done, we kind of developed the model with the variables in there that explains the most. And we have 2 protective factors. One is identity commitment, meaning people have explored and made a commitment in these different areas we talked before. And one is intrinsic motivation as a protective factor.
Is intrinsic motivation, do you consider that to be like the same thing as internal locus of control? But the point is it's coming from inside a person, right? I'm driven myself as opposed to being incentivized from externally to do something.
And the measure we used was more concentrated on learning.
Okay.
You know, why do I study? Why do I learn? What motivates me in terms of learning? Yeah.
Oh.
And the risk factors were, we were looking at things like family stress was a big one.
Was your
So-
sample mostly from Johnson City?
It was from ETSU.
ETSU? And that's really interesting because in my experience, I've noticed that the students here are particularly connected to their families in ways that is not necessarily the case of, say, students up north. And so they tend to have, I think, greater response to family stressors. They're compelled to go home if there's a family member ill or whatever else. And so that is important.
And the final one was actually their perception of academic ability in terms
So
of
like their
how they
academic self-efficacy?
perceive themselves, how able they are to do the work in terms of math, in terms of writing skills.
So like basic academic skills. And I would imagine that if they didn't perceive themselves to be skilled or able, they were less likely to
They
stay.
were less like, well, we didn't look at who stayed and who didn't stay. We looked at how likely they were in terms of thinking to drop out.
Oh, okay. So what can we do? I mean, I imagine this research has enormous implications for how we go about enculturating students to college and first-year programs and orientations and whatnot. And so what would some of your suggestions be for how we use your data?
Well, one of the things I think really is to work on identity issues because I think they are important. We are already doing that actually. We have that Puzzle of Life course.
Yes.
So
We had Dr. Stephen Brown on last season it was, and he talked about that course.
And so I really think this is an important aspect in terms of intervention aspects. You know, this is also, we have the Center of Academic Excellence.
Yes.
You know, to tell students what the services are that are available, where they can go to get these services.
And they're so available and so accessible. And everybody knows that we have them, I hope, anyway.
I hope.
Can you coach a person to develop an identity? Can you motivate a person to do more exploration and commitment? Or is that something that people are predisposed or not to do?
There are certain, I mean, someone who is, when we talk about, you know, predisposed or maybe some traits, or people who are more open to new experience, if we want to take one of these aspects, are also more likely to explore.
Okay.
But what we have also found that a lot of times, it used to be we had the diffuse status. And this is an identity status where people don't explore and they don't make a commitment. And usually when you are in the diffused identity status, this is where more of the negative outcomes are related to more depression, more alcohol abuse, more drug abuse.
Oh.
Because these are people kind of who go sometimes with whatever.
Yes, because I don't know who I am. So whatever's in the environment or whatever.
However, what we have found is that sometimes it is very hard. Young people might not really be diffused, but they have no idea where to start the exploration process because there's so much information out there. So they might show up on some of the interviews that we do or some of the surveys are diffused, but it's not a true diffusion.
So are you proposing that there's another, as of yet, unidentified identity status?
We already have that.
Okay.
You know, we kind of look at that and how do we measure that? So when we look at the research, because we saw a couple years ago, identity researchers have their own meeting, their own societies.
Yes.
So this came up a couple of years ago that we just saw such an increase in the diffuse status and everyone was kind of thinking, what is happening here?
Right, are people really people really diffuse or something else going on? Oh, and how much of that has to do with, and I imagine you would posit that much of that has to do with this sort of shift in the family structure and this extended adolescence thing?
Might also have to do with that is part of that it takes longer.
Yeah.
And also technology. I think with a lot of information at their fingertips sometimes.
You don't know how to sift and sort or prioritize. That is so interesting. So I have students who will come to me in their last semester. If I'm lucky, it's their second to last semester. And they say to me, I don't know what I'm going to do when I graduate. based on your research, is there anything that I could usefully suggest to them to help them decide that for themselves? Because surely I can't tell them what they ought to be doing, but what they're asking me to do is help them figure it out. So is there anything that you might suggest based on your research that I can guide them to be able to make better decisions for themselves about how they want to spend their life on Earth?
I try to guide the students that come and see me, to get as much information as possible from different sources. Talk to your professors, talk to people in the field.
Right.
Talk to other students who are in the department, who are getting seniors. Where are they applying to? What are their future plans? And again, if at all possible, try to work in the field, to get an internship, to get a practicum. Is this really what you think it would be?
Exactly.
Because I think sometimes, and from my own adolescence, I knew most of the time what I didn't want.
Yes, I was very decisive about that.
Me too. So but it took me much longer to figure out what I really wanted, and to get the information on that.
So a bad strategy is not to rule things out. I mean, that's, by a process of elimination, I arrive at a set of things I might consider doing. You don't have to pick the one thing. How could you possibly know that? I don't know. I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up.
Yeah.
That is enormously interesting, and that excites me. But let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the graduate school. One of the things that you oversee is Illuminated, which is the graduate school magazine. The School of Graduate Studies 3 times a year.
3 times a year.
Publication, and you highlight the accomplishments of graduate students on this campus.
Yes.
What kinds of things, how does a graduate student end up in this magazine? How do I get it, and how do I end up in it?
Okay. We send out, usually once or twice a semester, I send out to the coordinators, to the graduate coordinators, and actually it will come out this week or beginning of next week. I send out an email with an attachment to it because there are 3 features that student can be put in the magazines.
Okay.
Now. There are the research articles.
Yes.
And we are capturing thesis, dissertation, capstones. So research projects that are going on campus that the students are involved in with their advisors.
Yes.
Or advisor.
Okay.
We try to have, a variety from different colleges, different topics. So this is the one aspect. Then we are looking at students who have graduated with a degree from ETSU, and we have a little section called Where Are They Now?
Excellent.
So we try to follow up, where are they, what is their career, what are they doing? And it's exciting when you see what our students are doing all over the country and all over the world.
Some of our own recent graduates, I'm enormously impressed with where they are, and they've blazing trails all over the place, and it's marvelous. Good.
And the third one is we have a little section of the good news, and we call it where are they going? Some interesting aspects, when students got accepted into a PhD program or another doctoral program, a professional program. We like to kind of capture that to see what is possible.
Yes.
Where students are going, and again, it's the same thing. People go all over the country in very different fields. Students are very successful.
Students are very successful, and that's the whole point of Illuminated. How long have we been publishing Illuminated?
This will be the fall issue. We started in summer last year.
I was going to say, this is a very new publication, unless I just missed it the entire time I've been here, which I don't think would be.
And the exciting part is also, yes, I oversee this, but it would not be possible without the help of the 2 students that are helping. We have a writer coming from professional communication.
Yes.
And she goes with us, she does the interviews, she writes them up, we send it back. And then we have a student from New Media Studio who is doing all the layout, who is doing the photography, the graphic design.
Everything. So it's again, a student-published
Yes, without the students
Document.
would not be possible.
And so you just sort of like make sure the thing is getting done.
Yes.
And you entrust it to their very capable
Yes.
hands.
Oh, and they are very capable.
They are it's a beautiful magazine. I love it when I get to see a copy, because mostly, especially our students get highlighted now and again. Our former producer, Miriam Ayad, was working for you. She was,
Yeah.
I don't know what she was doing. Was she one of your writers?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes.
And so yes, she was enormously wonderful. What else is going on in the graduate school that would be important or exciting for us to know about?
Well, we have all kinds of. We have very different programs. They're very diversified degree programs.
Are we projecting to have any new programs added in the next academic year or so, or?
There is most of the time development of new programs in talk. It is a very long process.
It is a
but,
very, very long process.
Yes, there hopefully will be more programs coming in the very near future. I'm really excited that we can offer graduate assistantships to about 25% of our graduate students.
25%, which means 25% of the graduate students who come to this campus are able to get their tuition paid for. Wait, is that just GAs? That's just graduate assistantships, which means they get their tuition waived and they get a paid position.
And a stipend with it, yeah.
Which is fabulous. And it's not huge, but it's a whole lot more than if you had to pay your own tuition and then work,
yeah.
which is what?
You know, and I look back, I was very fortunate as a graduate student. I had a GA position, you know, and a lot of times is you get also experience with that.
Yes. I know the GAs in our department, they teach for us. And a lot of them have aspirations to go on into collegiate level teaching positions and whatever else. And where else are you going to get that kind of experience? It's either you don't have a GA, you graduate, you go off and you're like, oh, I'm going to teach for the first time in my whole life as my profession, never having done it before, or you can amass a couple of years of experience and get mentored and coached. And so I think it's enormously valuable to be professionally mentored while simultaneously doing your academic coursework.
And, you know, we have the GPSA.
The Graduate Student Professional Association.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also helps with travel funding.
Yes.
So
one of our students actually just benefited from that. She was able to go to Scotland, I think, to do some ethnographic research, and part of her funding anyway came from the GSPA.
So it is a great student organization, you know. They do a lot of things for graduate students, you know, they also meet, you know, they discuss issues that are upcoming, but also the travel fund. And again, it provides students this experience to go out, to go to these different meeting places, to these conferences.
Do they do social activities?
Working. They meet, yeah. Depends how you define social. But as a graduate student, I think your definition of social sometimes shrinks.
Indeed. I just want to talk to other human beings instead of just reading my own research.
We also have the awards that we recognize our outstanding graduate students. We have different awards for research, for thesis, dissertation, capstones, also teaching.
Yes. I didn't know we had a graduate teaching award.
Yes, two. For teaching associate and teaching assistant.
I did not know this.
Yeah.
All
so
right.
please.
Noted. I knew we had the research awards. I sit, and often you send me emails and ask me to sit on the ad hoc thesis committees or whatever else. I didn't know we had a teaching award. That's really exciting.
It is. And then the research grants to support the research that they're doing. And it's up to $800, but it's a start.
That's a lot of money for a graduate student. That's outstanding. So you love your job. I imagine it's like super stressful and intense and whatnot, but it is wonderful that you're doing it and that our students have the opportunity to access the graduate school and you and your resources and whatever else. We are out of time. Thank you so much, Dr. Karin Bartoszuk, who has been sitting here with us from the School of Graduate Studies. Join us next time on Spotlight ETSU.